Hello, I am Vern Cooper.
And I am Ebony Williams. And The Last of Us premiered a week ago, and we interrupt this program.
Yes, if you've been with us, you can probably saw this coming. We would be back for
We have
season
been
two.
waiting. We have been waiting.
So, confession time. How many times have you watched the episode?
Fun. It was
Okay.
surprising. Surprising. I have my notebook. I should have got it for us recording today. That I ticked every time I watched an episode from season one. Surprisingly, I've only watched it once. I don't know why that is.
I watched it the first time and it made me really excited for the next episode, but
Mhm.
it seemed like the kind of piece of storytelling that doesn't really invite a second watch, even though I don't say that as criticism. I think that it's really cool to be able to have something that says, like, it felt like an information dump to me.
It did. It's been catching us up on some things
Mhm.
that have been going on. So at the end of there was a point, because you and I have done this a couple of different times, but you and I talked about what would be my wish list for the next season. And I got what I wanted.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what their day to day was like. I wanted to see, what the dynamic was, what their relationship was. And I got it. Like, I got to see where we are now, what their lives are like, what every day is like. And now I get bits and pieces that tells me how everything is going to fall apart.
Yeah. I remember us talking about the ending where Ellie asks Joel whether, about what happened with the Fireflies, and he lies to her. And I remember us sort of trying to guess whether she knew he was lying or not. And I've talked about that with some friends that we watched it. I've watched it twice, and I watched it a second time with some friends who played the game, which was, enlightening. They shared some things with me about specific differences, and those were really cool just because that they were all made with intentionality. Nothing about the storytelling that takes place in the game is throwaway. It all pieces back together. And so any decisions to or any changes that happen between adapting the second game to screen were either made for storytelling reasons and also just adaptation, like the production and industry specific things. So there's a big difference between adapting the second game to film or to screen than there was the first one, because the first one, it was 10 years after the game had come out. They were talking to an audience who either played the game back then and loved it, or had never seen it. So they did this really faithful thing. This episode did not. It didn't open the way the game does. It actually deviated right off the bat. It deviated from the game in both, like, introducing things that didn't exist at all in the game, or introducing things that don't happen until way later in the game.
Yeah. So one thing I will say though is I like the continuity
Mhm.
because it starts with the giraffe, and that giraffe is a very critical point in that episode. Like when we realize that Ellie is in this place where she's kind of hopeless. So for me, like starting with that giraffe and then kind of placing where these new set of characters are, one which we learn has plans for Joel. Placing that for me helped ground me in where we were now in the story and where we're going. So I appreciated that piece.
That's a good point about that giraffe scene too, because it was a turning point for both Ellie and Joel. It was kind of a moment where he fully recognized the way he was viewing Ellie. It was like that was the moment the decision was made for him, whether he knew it or not, of how he was going to react. And it was also a moment of Ellie having to fully think about, like, this decision is life and death, I guess. Like that moment when you're a kid and suddenly you realize that is real.
So, okay, life and death, the moment you realize death is real. So, we talked about this also. Another one of our favorite episodes, I think, was episode 4 when we meet Henry and his brother. And we talked about how they buried their dead. And here we see that again. We see it starts with what is Abby burying her dead. So I think like for me, that those are particular callbacks that place me in season one. So I laugh because I think about how one of the things I've learned through this process is to trust the story that they're trying to tell me. So this is so funny. I'm a go around the world just to come back to this point. I've been reading this two-part series, so Iron Widow, and now I'm reading Heavenly Tyrant. And I want to read the synopsis so bad. I want to know what happens next. But then I settle into this. I need to trust the story that they are telling me. So then when I think about those two things, I think about the giraffes. I think about this concept that we've talked about burying their dead, that are again for me connections to season one. Then I go back to trusting the story that they're trying to tell me. So yeah, I think about those two things too when I think about this book that I'm currently reading and I want to know what's going to happen. And then I'm like, I think about The Last of Us. Trust the story that they're trying to tell you.
Yes. Yeah. It's I think it's that's the respectful way to engage with like something creative folks have put out there, is experiencing it in the format that they like. They created this for us. They created this
Hmm.
experience, and the opening with that scene of Abby and her crew who are grieving the fireflies, that was really powerful to me because it sets up one of the major themes of the whole show, which is moral relativism, and how uh, what is really the consequences and the weight of making decisions that results in violence, or making the decision to inflict violence, and those decisions should never be made lightly. And of course, Joel didn't make it lightly, but he is a violent person. He's always been a violent person. And Ellie is also being, I guess, just formed into a violent person because of her nature. And so when Abby says, I believe, I don't know the fella's name who says, like, what are you going to do? And I think I said out loud, she's going to do exactly what Joel would do. And so the viewer is going to be tested in how we actually, what our internal workings are when it comes to deciding whether to condone or reject violence or actions.
Another thing that I think though is when does it stop?
Doesn't I mean,
Right?
so that came up for me when a lot of things are continued with Ellie's development. So we open with a learning episode for her. I think our first introduction to Ellie is violent. She's in that sparring match with, is it Caleb, the big guy? Because he's smaller, but he's like the commander. I think the larger dude she's sparring with is named Caleb, and so she's bloodied. She's kind of losing this fight, and there's a very like, this is at the moment her development is signaled to us. Like the moment she's at developmentally is signaled because she's losing the fight, but she doesn't know it. And she's just having a really good time, and she eventually wins it. And she's angry to learn that she would have lost had it been a fair fight,
Yeah.
which is the case often.
Yeah. Right. So Joel's presence is looming over that situation because, I actually watched the first episode again before I watched the new episode. So I watched the first episode of season one again,
Mhm.
and it took me back to that scene with Tess and, oh, what is his name? Tess and the guy with the battery.
I can't remember his name.
He talks about your guy. What about your guy? And Joel is that guy, regardless. Like, even in this room, Ellie thinks, she is in control and she's fighting on her own, but Joel has a heavy presence.
Right.
What about your guy? I don't want to be accountable to your guy.
And that's influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's another theme that's been it was in the first season, but it's going to be a big mechanic of the show for the second season, which is absent presence. and this is it's like a cultural theory. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Benjamin. It's just so a lot of characters or a lot of things happen entirely because of something that the characters have never encountered or we've never encountered. And so I remember
Mhm.
I texted you. I was like, "Who is Eugene? Who the?"
Yeah, yeah.
Because Gail also is a brand new character. She didn't exist in the game, and that is a really significant decision. The character of Eugene did exist, but is only ever present through notes and things. He's dead by the time we actually meet him in the show and in the game. And so like he's referenced in the mall scene with Riley and Ellie because he was stationed there. He was a Firefly who was stationed there.
Okay.
I had to do a lot of digging to find that.
Huh.
But the I think inclusion of Gail's character is really interesting. It's a very similar to how they did with Frank and Bill for episode 3. They took a little piece that was a detail in the game and turned it into what is going to be a significant storytelling device, but also just her as a therapist. What did you think about that scene?
What did I think about that scene? I have a lot of questions, right? So we know that Joel killed Eugene, right?
Yeah,
But I don't know how. Like,
yeah.
was he infected? I don't know.
We will find out, but I don't
I'm
know
sure
you.
we
Yeah.
will. I'm sure we will. About that scene, I'm invested in Joel. I love Joel. Joel
Mhm.
can do no wrong in my eyes. So I just believe with whatever Joel did what he had to do because he had to do it.
And she said that too, actually,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
when she said her piece, you know.
yeah.
But the thing in there that was going to bring this back to violence is she said, "I know you had to do it, but what really bothers me is the way that you did it." And so there's going to be, I think, the thing that is pulled out from that and then explored is the fact that it was not maybe a humane killing. It wasn't simply accomplishing the job. It was extra violent. It was above and beyond, which is something that Ellie has learned from Joel as well. She doesn't stop when Caleb taps. Like, just she's like insatiably hungry for violence.
But I don't think we've seen Joel be above and beyond.
With
Like, so let's think about it. So in the first episode, when he kills the grandma, he just swings the wrench once. He does it with force, but he just swings it once. Like, he goes through the very last episode, he kills everybody. He doesn't like shoot people excessively, but he takes care of everybody in that place.
do you remember when he killed the guard that caught them leaving the QC?
Oh yeah, okay,
I
okay,
think
okay.
so.
Okay, yeah, yep, yep, yep.
Because you're right about him before Sarah dies. When he kills the grandma, he kills the neighbor, he's very much just reacting and doing the thing. And then I think maybe it's a progression. He like is perhaps building because that's the way trauma affects too. Like if we don't address it. So maybe when because I think it's going to happen in a flashback, is what my friends told me, is we'll actually see what happened. Or wait, no, it isn't in the game, but it'll probably happen. We will see it eventually. If it's referenced, we'll see it. And so whatever it is, then
Killing.
we'll be able to see exactly how it is. But I think that's what she means, is that there was something like that she considers to be above and beyond in how he handled this. And what his trigger is for that is always when Ellie's in danger.
Hmm.
So he can be, I suppose, even though, like you said, he's always in the room. You know, I don't want your guy to find out about this. So people perceive him to be extra violent. But I think it's really more of a feature of when he's looking out for somebody like Ellie.
So I have something really heavy on my heart when I look at this relationship between Joel and Ellie. Right? We know what's coming, right? Like, even if I didn't know what's coming, I know Abby's plans. And for me, I found myself getting upset with Ellie over this grudge that she's holding because she doesn't know the time she has is precious. And this is me speaking as somebody who has lost a parent.
Yeah.
who has been like, even when, always her presence is in the room, and no matter what, I'm her baby. And to not have that anymore, to know what it's like to not feel that tether holding you down, I found myself getting really impatient with Ellie.
She's
Yeah.
not a sympathetic character at the
No.
moment we meet her,
Yeah.
and that feels authentic to where
Mhm.
she would be. It is so difficult to have patience for young people, and that is, I would argue, if there is any such thing as human universals, that would be up there, because it isn't that we don't like them, it's that we remember the things that we wish we could have done differently. We remember the
Yeah.
mistakes we made, and we constantly wish some, or maybe many of us constantly wish for the opportunity to try things over or do something different.
Yeah.
And so it is kind of us trying to protect people who are younger than us,
Mhm.
but it manifests as just being, I'm so frustrated with you. I can't I and that's an unfairness that we have. But I
Yeah.
agree. I'm also having trouble, even though I can identify with her where she's at developmentally. I was fucking moron when I was 19. And also this, like, her queerness, and she is sort of placed into a really potent metaphor for just small town America.
Yeah. Okay, so you introduced queerness. Also in that scene, okay, so what I didn't realize is that scene, I think is basically something that happened in the game. That scene when the guy calls them a slur at the party. So what I was thinking is we have this opportunity to build a new world, and we bring the old shit with us.
That's what we do.
Like, right? Like, that stuff doesn't exist in this world, but you are bringing it in. I guess, like, I don't know. Me not knowing that that was something that was in the game, that was just something that sat with me. Like,
Yeah.
we have this opportunity to build a new world, but then things like homophobia is something that we bring with us when there are larger concerns like the infected.
That scene impacted me as well, and it immediately made me reflect on the first season, where it's never meant, like, homophobia is, it's it's not named explicitly. The journey that Bill and Frank have is encoded with, like, prescriptions from a society that doesn't exist anymore, but they lived in that society, they grew up in it. And they're also, it's also masculinity within those prescriptions. And so that was really cool to see those two characters kind of liberate themselves from that, or at least the one character. But if you are having to if you have to undergo a liberatory process from something, then it's not gone. And Ellie has never experienced it, which in a way really reminds me of working with young queer kids now. Not to say that they don't experience homophobia, but they're now living in a time that is very different to any time that they've lived in before. In fact, we promised them something different, you know, and then we dropped the ball. We fumbled it. We handed them the same, if not a worse, steaming pile of shit that we grew up in, or that we dealt with when we were young queer people. And so that introduction, I suppose, it felt really, really important to me, and I reflected back to what we were talking about earlier with this intentionality of storytelling. There's also something in the post credits, like, they talk about that in the making of featurette of the episode.
Oh, I didn't want.
There's a They mention that, you know, beliefs, whatever we know, believe, or learn follows us into whatever new context we have. Seth is somebody who lived in the previous time, right? He's old enough to have lived in the world before it fell. His beliefs are tied. He believes he is a Christian, and his fear is that further angering God will make the infected worse, will bring new. It's really interesting the way they phrased it. In a way, he's looking out for his community as well, by admonishing them for doing something that will bring further punishment from God if that's what he believes the infected are. And so it's a that is like one of the most like insidious pieces of the moments that build to where we are now. Like whoever is seen as the most deviant is who we punish first. And I think it's really important and powerful for them to include that because it's we always manage to dust that fucking thing off and just bring it back out. And then Joel's reaction is violence. And also that violence was escalated. My friends told me that in the video game he didn't like throw the man to the ground. It was he like made contact, but he didn't like actually hurt him so bad as he did in the show. So they dialed that violence up a little bit. And then Ellie's reaction is I don't know. I mean, she's embarrassed, I guess. She embarrasses him back.
Yeah. It's how we act. It just reminds me. I felt like I was the only child, and I talked about this a little bit before. I lost my mom 2017 to cancer, and I remember like being in my 40s and still feeling like I was trying to assert my adulthood.
Okay.
She knows my age. She knows I'm an adult, but I'm still her child.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I got from Ellie is I need to show you that I can take care of myself. I can handle this. I don't need your looming presence always over me.
Do you remember and I know what you mean too, like, my parents are still living, and so interacting with them, which I don't recently, I'm like, "Am I gonna see them before they die?" Because I won't be able to fly after May 7th because trans people can't get the real ID, and so, being a red state refugee, like, how long are they gonna live? But, the scene where she says, "I'm an adult, you have to let me do what I want," and I was like, "By what metric? Are you an adult? Are they still operating on this, like, you turn 18 years old and you're a legal adult now, even though there's no, like, real system for that? Like, has there's a lot of things that they haven't grappled yet with as a society that are gonna get them one day, right? Like, how do you decide someone is an adult? Because she's not behaving like one.
No, she's not. And does your ability to fight make you an adult?
Yeah. I mean, what is because we see that there's so many other valued skills. And
Yeah.
and where the work really needs to go into this society is in infrastructure, is in building, and all Ellie wants to do is go and, play, cosplay the what did they keep saying she was dressed up like as some Western thing?
I don't remember.
I'm not familiar with the genre, but, she's literally cosplaying as not an adult, as an action hero. She wants to be out swashbuckling and killing infected and stuff, and she has the privilege of being immune, which we don't even know if it's permanent yet, because now
We
we
don't
know
know.
the infection evolved. There's another character introduced that is not in the game, and is I'm very excited to see what they do with this character because it is Tommy and Maria's son, Benjamin. And we get one scene with him really where he like actually interacts with characters. I noticed a very particular theme with this scene, the way everybody interacts with this young boy, um, who's in the scene anyway. So Joel and Tommy, and even Maria, she doesn't do much interacting with him, but it is all about. So there's a teaching moment, right, where Joel gets him and sits in his lap, and kid's like, "What is this?" Because he doesn't know what a map is, and he starts asking him questions, and the learning is very like, "We're in here. Out here is other. Also out here is monsters." And then it begins this like joking, conditioning him to violence. And it's also very masculine, right? Like the way in which young boys are acculturated to masculinity of violence, of war making in particular. Like this was very encoded, and it was like they were even he was even miming shooting Joel and stuff, which I was like, is he going to shoot Joel later? But it didn't stop. So Joel did this. Tommy comes in and continues it, calls him killer.
Yeah. What do you think it would have been different if he was a girl, though?
Well, look at the way that Joel is teaching or tutoring or whatever Dina. Although Tommy is teaching Ellie how to shoot, but Ellie doesn't want that. I don't know what Joel would be teaching Ellie, so probably, I mean, he'd probably be teaching her similarly. And the introduction of homophobia too, or just gendering, is significant or will be significant later because there's going to be a trans character who's introduced or is in the game. I presume they will introduce There may be some, they may choose to do some different things with it. But the big I think the work that is done with raising the issue of gender in the game is to do with what roles we have. The choice to cast Catherine O'Hara
Mhm.
was also, I really loved that. And of course, she's offer only, so she did not audition for this role. They wrote it probably and said send it straight to her, which means in some ways the character was written with her in mind. So that's a significant detail for like how the story unfolds. Like it's something about the way she portrays or embodies this grieving brain expert.
Which is also interesting too, right? If we look at Catherine O'Hara, like look at her from Schitt's Creek to now, just her range. Like to be able to play somebody who is, I can just imagine as complex as this character is, to be able to still counsel the man who killed your husband.
Yeah.
Like just so much in that to be able to live in that gray space, right?
She doesn't have a ton. I mean, not to say that she doesn't, because she has a huge body of work, obviously, but people know her for um, quirky comedy characters
Yeah,
from,
yeah,
all of her collaborations with Christopher Guest or Eugene Levy, or the Beetlejuice
yeah,
films. Like
Beetlejuice.
she really does have. She excels in that particular like wheelhouse, but I know that just having seen there's actually quite a few characters in this played by folks who don't have done a lot more comedy or camp action and stuff like that. And those people, they can really like they can turn that switch. They can make that emotional shift happen. And her just like rolling into his therapy session lit as fuck.
Yeah.
I was like, oh boy. But I did have the question, how did this even happen? How did he, knowing that he killed her husband, wind up in therapy with her?
I don't know.
Because first I had the
So I was under the impression that they were seeing each other before he killed her husband.
that I would have to be oh, that I mean, that would make sense because it was clearly a recent thing that happened because it's her first birthday without him. In
Yeah.
the game, he
And the
was dead already.
shoes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that could be gosh, can you imagine, like, that happens and then he has to go to therapy with her the next time? What do you I think I had a response to, a character like Joel even being someone who seeks out therapy because I think previously, he would have felt to me like a character that would have not agreed to something like that.
So I think about some of the parallels between what is happening in this world and what happened with COVID. I think for me in thinking, think COVID was a turning point in a lot of ways for people when it comes to therapy. Now,
Mm,
I was in therapy pre-COVID, but I think because of some of the things around COVID and what came up for people, the uncertainty, the isolation, that maybe people who wouldn't have considered therapy before considered therapy after COVID. So I just say that because of things that I have seen. Like I've seen things like BetterHelp and other online
bro therapy.
platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah, and telehealth things become something that is we have commercials for now.
People talk really openly about it.
Yeah, people talk openly about it in ways that they may not have pre-COVID. So for me, I don't see it as a stretch because I can understand even thinking about, and I don't know how it happened. I don't know if somebody said to Joel maybe you should see therapy. I've been talking to so and so. Maybe it might be helpful to talk to so and so. And like, being someone who has been in therapy, even after COVID, I have had those conversations. Like, things are kind of difficult right now. Maybe it might be helpful for you to consider this. So I don't know. It didn't seem like a stretch for me.
He's also trying to solve a very specific problem
Mm,
to do with reconnecting with Ellie, or he's looking for a magic wand or something that will repair his relationship with Ellie, but also lets him off the hook for addressing what he did. And so two things are at work there. One is he would do pretty much anything for Ellie, and two, he's in a situation that's impossible to fix. Because one thing too is like when she asked him, "What did you do to her?" and he says that he saved her, he can't fully explain what that means. He can't tell anybody the truth about that because Ellie's immunity is supposed to be a secret.
right, right.
So he literally can't get help for himself. The only thing he can do is tell the truth and hash it out with Ellie, and he's just not prepared for that.
So, and here's the other thing that I think. So one of the things that I'm working on a creative project, and one of the things that I've been really thinking about is this idea that our wounds that don't receive oxygen can't fully heal. So those things that we keep inside, they can't fully heal because, like, another thing about this is being in community. So if I'm in community, I'm not holding this burden alone, but then you can hear what it is that's holding me down, holding me back. And you can say, I'm holding this with you. Okay, so you can either say what you did was out of line, here's how you move forward, or you were completely justified in doing this and you can give yourself some grace. He hasn't given anybody the opportunity to hold that weight with him. So and it's been 5 years, and he will continue to hold on to it until he tells her or he tells Ellie, because it won't fully heal until he can let it go.
And I notice he's not really utilizing Tommy as a resource. I don't think and Tommy alludes to this too, is like, Joel doesn't see Tommy as fully grown either. He doesn't see Tommy as his own autonomous self. He it's he's continued to parent him in the way a lot of older siblings do long after it's appropriate. And this is it's preventing them from having the kind of relationship that could help Joel.
That's true.
And so there's one of those, it's very similar to that unfair thing we do to young people when we're like, I know what you should be doing. Why aren't you doing the thing?
Yeah, yeah. Or assuming because you've dealt with something in your own way that you know how they should do it.
Yeah, I can't wait to learn more about Tommy. I understand that that's a big piece of the game as well. And so I assume that that'll make it to the screen. But Tommy's got he obviously will have a really unique perspective on Joel and be able to flesh out the kid. Right now, all of the things we know about Joel are from Joel's perspective. Very little of it is from Ellie's perspective because she hasn't been someone who has been outside of his sway until very recently.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you bring that up because I don't think I've really thought about that until just now. Like the importance of seeing Tommy and Ellie together because they both know what it's like to have the looming presence of Joel in their lives, or always feeling like they're fighting for this autonomy or to be grown or to be on their own, but his presence is always there.
And Tommy is also her uncle. And so like the relationship that you have with your aunts and your uncles is, I just remember, just speaking from my own experience, like that's very special and different than the one you have with your parents. It's like related, literally, but there's a little bit more comfort and freedom in there. It's something a little like more akin to, like, it's more not peership, but it's just a different kind of kinship than you have with your parents. And sometimes I remember feeling a little less scared with my aunts.
Yeah. That's the one thing about this show, um, that I just can't quite let go of is how much this show makes me think of my own family. How much it makes me think of my own relationship with my mom. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot to relate to there. No matter I feel like there's plenty of stuff about the apocalypse. There's plenty of stuff about The Walking Dead spent a lot of time treading this ground, and they did do some really interesting things. But the way that this is so hyper focused on what it does to not just the individual. It's almost like none of these characters actually are individuals. Like no character is treated as though they can exist outside of a unit. It is all about like who you are with.
Mhm.
And so it's really like powerfully making the case or illustrating the case that there is no such thing as an individual. There are our own internal unique reactions to being a member of a group. And then that's it. Because without access to a group, there's nothing to compare what we're dealing with against, I guess. Joel is like riding that line of being someone who is an outsider, or I guess still identifies as an outsider, but is trying to be a member of a group for particular reasons. He said like your council, and Maria was like, our council?
Yeah. Yeah. And remember, you were a refugee too. You were an outsider to this community.
Yeah. Yes, somebody risked letting you in here. And in a way, he kind of had his foot in the door already because of Tommy. So, but yeah, that was a really cool because what he's articulating is basically how do we keep this thing together in a way that we can provide for the people who are in here.
Yeah. So let me tell you something that I have been secretly worried about. I have been somebody who has not watched or played the game. Like thinking about what this next season can be, I know that there are a couple of things. Abby wants revenge. And then just from the previews, it looks like the infected come into this new community. And I was afraid that those two things were linked. And I think one of the things, like, ultimately, Joel's decision to save Ellie then puts his people in danger. And I think that that was my fear with this next season. And I think at the end of this first episode, they set me at ease because then I find out Joel isn't the reason why the infected will get into the new community. So yeah, I just found
With
that in. Yeah, the thing that they created in the first season, the
yeah,
those networks that they can feel even miles away. And speaking of things that they laid out in the first season that they call back to at the end of this episode, that whole network that we see pulsating in that tube thing.
as soon as they split that little clay thing open, I expected to see those there.
You did?
Yeah, and I was surprised that they didn't, like, that the folks who live in Jackson. And so maybe they haven't seen those before because 'cause they've been kinda sheltered a little bit.
Maybe they haven't. But Joel has. Joel
Yeah,
wasn't
but
there.
he's not there because he's, like, kind of neglecting his actual duties. Not neglecting, that may not be fair, but he's trying to do too much, I guess. But definitely the piece about, like, the decisions that he made or the actions that he took to save Ellie. Those and I feel like right now we're still free to sympathize with Joel in having done that, but, like, this is ultimately a clash of ideologies, and that's something I noticed about in the trailer for the rest of the season is there's a lot of ideology that's gonna be, like, at war, like, emerging, like, there's the Isaac and the Seattle people, and then there's this group that's, like, appears to be some sort of religious or spiritual sect. and they're so the idea, I guess, of remaking the moral order, that's really compelling to me, but it's going to be so tense. It's going to be really difficult to watch, I think. The like these characters trying to protect what they needs to be protecting while also navigating differing ideologies about how the world should look and how the world needs to look and what is right and what is wrong. And I'm tense about that. Like I'm nervous that I'm going to either like not enjoy or get sick of the the debate over right and wrong.
Yeah. Well, you know what though? I call back to this idea, right? Like there are so many times that so okay, let's think about this. That the season 1 episode, I mean season 2 episode 1 didn't start off the way the game starts off. But there is so many callbacks to me that say, "Trust, we told you a story. You went with us. Let
Yeah.
me hold your hand when I say this. You'll be okay."
And also the way that the so many things that are happen like way later in the game as flashbacks are introduced at this moment. The scene with Ellie and Tommy is one of them. My friend
Okay.
said that happens way later in the game as a flashback, but they chose to include it earlier. Trying to think like maybe so for a television format, for a storytelling format, the pace of it and the way information needs to be connected. I'm sure that a lot of the decisions to play with the chronology of the way the game plays out in the show, like I'm sure that that's where a lot of those come from. But we also had to introduce or reintroduce a whole bunch of people after a really long lapse of time.
Yeah. And some changes.
Mhm.
Like Maria was pregnant at the time.
Yeah.
Now there's a baby. Ellie went from being an adolescent to being more of adult.
Mhm.
Like it's been 5 years.
And she looks different, like, even though it's not been, I think, a full 5 years since they filmed the first season, but so, like, any physical differences have to be done either with, like, prosthetic or just work, and so the actor, Bella Ramsey, like, you can tell that they have been doing a lot of physical training. They look really strong. They physically look a lot different than they did, and I think it's only been a couple years, and that's really cool to see, like, someone who loves and believes in the character so much that they physically embody it. And I mean, there are extreme, I think, and dangerous examples of body modification for actors, but, this doesn't appear to be anything like that one. But, yeah, they just look super strong and confident. Looks like it, like, has they have figured out a way or they've done the work to find a new way to physically be Ellie in a short amount of time, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What do you think about Dina? Do you like her?
Tina. I don't know. Is Dina the same person that was looking at Ellie in the hall? Is it the same character? And Joel first gets to Jackson and they're eating and the
Oh
person is
my
looking at them.
gosh.
Is that the same person?
It might be. I asked my friends and they didn't know. So,
Okay.
um, well, I asked them, have we met her before? And so, because that was my question, is like this character, surely this show feels like the kind of universe where they would not just plop somebody in.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was
No,
like,
and I think so. My point was going to be again, I think that's where we see somebody has grown, somebody who not only looks different, looks older, but then this was somebody who was curious about Ellie, who was still curious in a lot of ways, like still asking Joel, "What are you doing? Teach me, tell me." Uh, but then also, instead of being on the outside wondering about this relationship with Ellie, is actually involved in this
yeah,
relationship with Ellie.
yeah. I thought it was kind of cute when she asks Joel to teach her about the circuit breakers, and I was like, that ain't what you want to know about. Like, she wanted to talk to him about Ellie, and so because like she interrupted him, and then they sort of did a reversal where he tried to interrupt, or she tried to go back to that, and he kept talking about Ellie. But yeah, I think to her, so there's a couple of things that she could represent. One, to me, I felt like, oh gosh, straight girl. who, like, is interested in, and that's my trauma, that's my queer trauma, like, plenty of people just simply come out of the closet at that age. But I'm just like, Ellie, I'm like, just she's already so fucking broken, and I the first person she ever, like, was physical with or was intimate with died in front of her, and then it just made me think about what love or romantic relationships, what other things are involved in that, in this type of environment, in this type of world. And I did laugh when she asked if Ellie was still seeing Kat, and she was like, "Well, she's the other one." It's like, oh, that's so true. But yeah, Ellie is gonna get somebody killed. Like, just, those two characters together, especially Ellie and Dina, like, I'm just so afraid for the way they escalate one another's behavior.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder, and I don't know this from the game, but it looked like it from the preview for the rest of the season. They're gonna leave Jackson, like, they'll have to evacuate, it looks like. That's a whole new kind of, I guess, trauma of going back to being without a home, without a place that you can to build and grow. And so this is gonna, I think there'll be some developmental setbacks for everybody. And then we'll see also, because there's something else I wanted to talk to you about, especially in terms of like learning and development, is the new monster, the stalker.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so I went back and I watched episode 1, and the thing that strikes me is that opening scene when they're talking to those 2 epidemiologists, and the one talks about, well, what if the world suddenly got warmer? And this virus, this fungus, not virus, this fungus would have to mutate. So then we know that this fungus has mutated. So then shouldn't surprise us that it will mutate again to be able to do the thing that it needs to do, which is sustain itself.
Yeah, it has a survival motivation.
Yeah, that's what it has. Yeah.
And so this introduction of a new kind of monster that is motivated differently, like, they talk about it as though it thinks, and I think that it's fair to say that it behaves that way. But if nothing else, it represents a new type of engagement. And this comes out in gameplay. So it was introduced in the game. Typically, the whole point, the way you operate in the game is silence, because when they hear you, that's when you get attacked, and they run at you, and then you just kill them when they get to you. And so the big reversal with this one is that it's smart. It hides. It avoids sounds. Like, you won't. It's not being quiet won't save you. And like, this is a whole new all of their, like, practices for patrols and squads. All of their safety measures are out of date now. It's like a new malware virus or something,
Yeah.
and they don't have a protection against it. So the possibilities for what this new monster can inflict on them, it looks like it's going to be like a whole attack, like a horde that comes at them.
Right, right. So I think that in season 1, they did a great job of planting some of the seeds for where they can potentially go in season 2.
Mhm.
Like, just thinking about, like, the web, the circuits that connect them. And then also, like, thinking about the epidemiologist in the first season, that first episode, talking about what this virus will do is it will seek to basically take over the world. Like, that's what it's going to do. So it is adapting to be able to do that.
I just thought of something.
What's that?
Did you ever read that book, I Am Legend?
No, I didn't.
It's really short. It's a novella, and I have a digital copy I can send you. I'll cut that part out. But there's a chapter in my dissertation about it because something that is one of the reasons it's such an important and impactful book is it does this something. There's a plague, right? There's a vampires, they call it. It's a virus of some kind. And the character is, to his knowledge, the only living human left, uninfected person. And he sees them all as monsters because they're different than him. And so he sets about killing them all, and then he's trying to cure them and things like that. And there's the ending of the book is him realizing, like, wait a minute, they're a new society. They can think. They put him on trial for murdering them all. And he's like, holy shit, I'm the monster. And so this, and it was like, I think it was written in 54, published in 54. This is like a really early and maybe the best example of a book that actually does the sympathy for the devil thing and makes us side with him. We're like, yeah, kill the monsters, save them all, whatever. And then for the end, for him to simply be like, actually, no, they qualify as a society, and I've been murdering them, and I'm their boogeyman. And so, and they put him on trial, and he kills himself because he was like, I deserve to die. I've been murdering sentient human beings. And that's kinda, I just realized that there's a lot of connective tissue between that and the potential for a sentient monster like a stalker. If they're organized, if they're able to communicate with one another, are they now the dominant, like, human species on Earth? That raises some moral questions.
Can they coexist? That's the question. You know what else it made me think about? Last season when we talked about this, you talked about episode 7 where Riley says we all end up that way. And you asked me, what does that mean? And as I was getting ready for episode 1 of this second season, and in my head, like, no matter how hard we try, is that ultimately our fate? Like, are we delaying the inevitable?
Or is the inevitable something that needs to be fought at all? I mean, there's this, like, I don't know what the field is. I think it's like it's just logic, I suppose, largely, but there's this axiom that in a universe of infinite possibilities, anything that is not impossible is inevitable. So at some point, anything that happens was always going to happen because it wasn't impossible. And so I don't thinking about whether or not we should fight the inevitable or how or not. That's fight it if it helps, whatever. I'm not saying nobody should fight the inevitable. I'm not saying don't fight cancer if you have it, but how our orientation to what is inevitable can be a powerful component in how we cope with stuff.
Wow.
There's a lot of
See,
traumas that are
it's,
inevitable,
there are.
and they may not happen to every single one of us, but they will happen to someone at some point.
So I've been thinking a lot about this idea of fighting. Like when we talk about disease, we talk about fighting, battle with cancer, fight with cancer. So then, like, I don't know. What you just said kind of brings that up for me. Does everything need to be a fight? Can we reimagine because then fight ultimately means violence, right? Which takes us,
Then that is
I put myself on this little wheel.
because there's also this tension, and sometimes people will even say this. Like I heard a keynote speaker that we invited just gave a really powerful speaker for Asian American Heritage Month. She's a Hmong refugee, and she was talking about how her experiences made her who she is. I hear people say that all the time, and at first, sometimes I think what are we saying about those experiences? Are we saying they were ultimately good when we say that? No, I don't think we are. But there's something to be said for being able to work with instead of fight against the things that have happened to us. Like when things that are unfair or just outright evil happen to us, they shouldn't have happened. Not necessarily, I guess. I don't know if that's the way to put it, but it's just not good that they happen. There's no need to try to make it sound like this was some gift that something bad happened to you. But it doesn't disempower or it doesn't, what am I trying to say? I think making that thing something that you can at least look at with regularity and say, this is a piece of who I am. This is something that happened to me and it became a piece of who I am, is a healthier position than to be someone who needs to never look at it.
Again, you have to look at it
Yeah.
because it wounds that don't receive oxygen don't heal.
And that's why Gail is here. And so this therapist, this character of a therapist is going to maybe help us facilitate that theme throughout this season. As a guest star, I don't know how long she's in for, but we do know that she is at least in several more episodes just from the I'm so excited. And I'm so grateful for an idea like that.
Mm.
Any final thoughts? Is there anything we didn't talk about?
The thing we didn't talk about, I think we should probably wait,
Okay.
but what it looks like when Abby gets her revenge.
I'm not ready
I
to talk
know.
about that because
I know.
it's the perfect conflict for this story. There couldn't be a better conflict than exploring or illustrating an actual consequence of violence. And in a video game, especially a super violent video game, or just a genre too, just as if this television were a standalone show, it is by definition very violent. And it raises and necessitates violence, but it is also doing, I think, something really mature or responsible by problematizing the violence itself, like as a tool to solve problems. Even if sometimes the only thing that can happen is going to be violence, just like the bad things that happen to us, we have to look at it. We have to like have the strength to look at to sit with the consequences of the violence that we perpetuate.
Yeah. I think though, I don't know. I think Joel it will accept
I think he'll
whatever that
understand.
consequence. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he will.
It reminds me of my stupid cat. He He's very special. His name is Felix, and so when he was always the youngest child, it was just him and Oscar, the older one, who's not stupid. And Oscar let Felix get away with everything. Felix just could have all the food he wanted, and he cared so much about food. And then I found this kitten in my friend's engine on a really hot day, and I was like, she's gonna die. I don't know what to do with her. I didn't want her, but I brought her home anyway. And Felix was so fucking angry. He was like, I am the baby. Why did you bring a baby in this house? And so he couldn't stand her. He hated her. But the only thing he would let her that she did that he was like, I get it. She would steal his food. So he's the most food motivated thing I have ever seen, but he understands why the baby wants his food because he can vibe with that. He remembers, like, oh yeah, that makes me feel better too. It's so interesting. I was really shocked. Like he's not stupid. He's special needs. He has a brain injury, but so like just watching the way he learns and things. Sometimes I'm like, I can see exactly what just happened in your head. You were able to borrow the perspective of what's motivating this person, and I think Joel is he's a character who will be able to do that, and he's gonna be a really it's gonna be really powerful to have him be our audience surrogate for something like that.
Yeah.
For taking perspective of somebody who's killing you.
Yeah, because of a decision you made, because something you did.
These are the consequences of our actions. I don't know if it's gonna go the way that it does in the game, but yeah, it's still gonna be there are gonna be times when we just don't feel good, and that's okay. We'll talk about those as well.
That's the thing about investing in a character. And I think thinking about myself, I think that that's why I try to isolate so much. It's because if I don't get invested, I don't have to deal with the loss. And, I know it's coming. I know for Joel.
Mm.
I don't know. I have to see the story they want to tell me when the thing that I've invested in is not there anymore.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And it means that a lot of development is gonna have to go into these other characters.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be cool that, they'll have to develop Ellie, Tommy, Maria, Dina, all the ones that survive. I think they're up to it. I'm definitely gonna. I'm here, open hearted. You know, do your worst.
Do your worst.
Eh, I think the next episode is going to be kind of action packed because right at the end of this episode, we see Abby at the gates. Like she and what looks like a huge group of people have crested this mountain
Yeah.
and they're looking down at Jackson. And so
Right, which is at the same spot kinda where Joel
it
and
is.
Ellie were, which is so I found myself being like, "Okay, he has at least 2 more days with her, we're okay." Like, it's gonna take them some time to get down, so
It'll take a minute, but yeah, they're there. And then so the two threats materialize at the same time, basically.
Yeah.
At the end, the tendrils start to move, and then Abby and I think the Seattle crew, Isaac, reach the gates. And so one threat's already inside, essentially. Well, in a way, they both are, right? The one threat is not in there yet. There aren't infected in there, but it knows about it, right? The knowledge of it has arrived, and the
It
same
is
with Abby.
inevitable. It has been 5 years in the making, there is nothing stopping this threat.
Well, I think to close out, it would be cool to talk about where we leave Joel and Ellie in their relationship, like because going back to what has happened at the New Year's Eve party, Steph has called them a slur, and Joel has retaliated with violence, and then the party kind of goes on, and we see the tendrils. Oh, no, no, and then we see, Joel leaves, and then shortly afterwards, I suppose, Ellie leaves, and she walks by him on the porch, and they make eye contact, and I thought she was gonna come and talk to him for, like, a second. She looked like sh I mean, I think that the performance that Bella Ramsey gives is that Ellie was considering talking to Joel,
Yeah.
but chose not to because she thinks she has all the time in the world.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited, but I'm worried, and I'm also just I think I'm really excited. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna settle in and trust these stories that people are trying to tell me, okay? So I'm not gonna read the summary of Heavenly Tyrant, or I'm not gonna wait
No.
or read what happens in The Last of Us. I mean, because they might decide to do something different anyway. So
Yeah, they probably will. Well, everyone, thanks for sitting through maybe our 14th episode about The Last of Us, but we're back, baby, and we're not
we're back. We're
stopping.
back
So you know it, you love it. We'll see you next time on
next
We Interrupt This
time.
Program for more The Last of Us.